Hello, hello, hello. This is Priscilla with Scylla Travel, helping you live the dream through travel. And how is everybody doing today? I see that there are quite a few people who are watching. Thank you, Lillian, for joining. Thank you, Chloe, for joining. Thank you, thank you. I appreciate you. Thank you, Elmira Raven. Thank you. And Travis Parker, welcome. Travis won a gift card last week. Travis, did you get your gift card, your coffee card? Okay, let's see. This is Priscilla with Scylla Travel coming at you from the Charleston, South Carolina area. And Scylla Travel is a boutique travel agency that offers premium travel planning and advisory services for empty nesters in their second act of their lives. So I generally service curious travelers who want to look and experience more and get more out of their vacations. So, we're here to talk about an extension of what we talked about last Sunday. This is an extension of discovering Black history and culture in France because there is a trip coming up. It's also going to be my retirement trip in 2024, Juneteenth. So, let me check to see if I have any YouTube or Facebook people. YouTube, Facebook, are you here? Glad to see you. Thank you. Thank you. I can see people are watching from my Facebook page. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Glad to see you. And thank you, all of you guys out there on StreamYard who decided to sign up because you'll be entered in a chance to win another gift card this year. Excuse me, this evening. So, hello, Joanne. Nice to see you. Hello, Donna. How are ya? Nice to see you. Glad you could be here. So, today what we're going to talk about is a little bit more history before we delve into the um trip, which I'll start talking about that during the next segment. So, this is Priscilla with Priscilla Travel, and let's get into it. And we're back. Okay, so here to talk about all that jazz, a little history of jazz in France, because jazz is a major element of the um, trip next year. It's a river cruise sailing the Rhone River in France, 7 days, plus 3 nights in Paris, and there will be some Black culture and history tours in the cities of Paris and in Marseille. So we'll be traveling up the Rhone from the northern part of France down to the southern part, the Mediterranean part of France, ending in Marseille. So it's going to be a fabulous, fabulous trip. But this is just a little something to just whet your appetite about the kinds of tours that have been incorporated into this river cruise. So now this river cruise is Alma Waterways. Now I Sell. I'm one of their partners. They're one of my partners for river cruising. I always knew I wanted to go on a river cruise, just didn't know which company to go on. That's why I go with. That's why I became a travel advisor. So I did sail with them in 2021 during the pandemic. Yes, and it was an awesome experience. I did sail this itinerary, except this itinerary was different then. It was just it didn't have the additional cultural tours added to it. It just had the regular French cultural tours. And those regular French cultural tours are absolutely amazing. We still will be having those. We still will be visiting the Hermitage, visiting the wine countries, visiting uh, Vienna, visiting some of these cities that have ancient Roman ruins and footprints, uh, ancient churches, just all of these little cities, visiting Avignon, the Papal Palace. There's actually a big jazz community there. And we'll have some opportunities to do some shopping, maybe visit a truffle farm. That's interesting. those of you who have signed up for the VIP list, if you looked at that page, you will see a link off to my images, my pictures that I took while I was sailing on that exact itinerary on that exact same ship. But of course, it was before this particular itinerary was offered. And I'm going to give you a little background on that because during that trip, a group of travel advisors went, and the owner of the company, her name is Christine Karst, said, what would you travel advisors like to see? And we saw that they were doing something, extra with DNA and ancestry and doing some Jewish heritage trips as well as some Hispanic heritage trips. So we said, a few of us said, hey, wouldn't it be nice if you could do some African American or Black history culture? Because France is actually a place where there's a lot of Black culture, not just African American, but also African and Afro Caribbean culture in France. And wouldn't it be nice if we could have a tour, including some of those elements? So that's what this is. So the first sailing is this summer in August. Uh, the maiden voyage. It was short notice. There was so many people who wanted to take that sailing that they offered another one for Juneteenth of 2024. So that's the one that I'm promoting right now, and I actually will be going on that tour myself because I will be retiring from federal service after almost 30 years. So that's going to be my retirement trip. Not retiring from travel, but just from my full time career in IT. Okay, so now let's get into it. A history of jazz in France. Okay, so in the early 20th century, um, jazz came to France. And it came to France by way of um, soldiers, African American soldiers fighting in World War One. They were stationed in Europe. And at the end of the war, many of them decided to stay in France because of the reception that they got from the French. They felt more liberated there. So many of them, the early part of the 20th century, which is like around 1910, what was it? World War One was in the early 19 teens, the 1900 and the teens. So during that time, many African American soldiers, that was their first opportunity basically to fight for their country, but the military was segregated at that time. So there was an opportunity where the French actually allowed or encouraged the United States to let those Black troops fight with them in the French Foreign Legion because the military in the US was segregated. So once they left, once the war was over, they introduced jazz to France. And then the French fell in love with Black culture. So this is from the 1900s to the 1910s. Jazz arrives in France with the African American soldiers. And this is a picture of one such group. They actually played in the Army band, as a matter of fact, and then they returned. It was from the 369th All Black Regiment, the Harlem Hellfighters, as a matter of fact. But this is a picture of them returning from Europe, but many of them went back. Okay, so then here comes the Harlem Renaissance. So the next decade from the 1920s to the 1930s starts the Harlem Renaissance. And during that period of time is when African American culture became hot. Okay, so Harlem in those days, it was the place to be if you were an African American, you were involved in any type of entertainment, singing, dancing, writing. That was the place where African Americans used to congregate because Harlem was an all Black community. So there were quite a few um, affluent Black people living in Harlem during that time. So, Manhattan, so it's above Manhattan, right? So Manhattan was set ablaze, from the energy from these artists. So many of the clubs, like the Cotton Club and many of the other clubs, sprang up during this time and became famous for jazz, as a matter of fact. but jazz, we know, spread across the globe. So during the Harlem Renaissance, during the 1920s to the 1930s, there were African American artists, writers, and musicians who sought artistic freedom, and they wanted to escape racism and segregation in the U.S. So, some of the early African American performers established jazz in France. Now, one such notable person was Sidney Bechet, and he lived from 1897. That's a typo to 1959. He was from New Orleans. He was a Creole person, a Black Creole person. His dad was a musician. He was an American jazz saxophonist, clarinetist, and composer. And he was one of the very first jazz soloists. As you could see, he's playing the clarinet there. So, but this guy, he was one of the very first African American artists to travel to Europe. So that was Sidney Bechet, and he spent most of his time, his latter years, in Paris because he was one of the pioneers. Now here's Ada Bricktop Smith. She was actually a dancer. She lived between 1894 to 1984. She was from West Virginia, born to a biracial mother and black father. On her mom's side, her grandfather was Irish. He had red hair and freckles, and they called her Bricktop because she inherited the red hair and freckles. But she was still a black woman. She was an American dancer, jazz singer, and vaudevillian. She also was one of the first saloon keepers in Paris, black saloon keepers in Paris. So she owned Chez Bricktop in Paris from 1924 to 1961, and she also had a couple other clubs in Italy, and I forget the other country, but she was famous. So these folks, they prospered after World War One. So here's Miss Josephine Baker, who lived between 1906 and 1975. Now, we talked a little bit about her yesterday because she was a woman of many talents. But when she first came on the scene in Paris, it was a part of this dance troupe called La Revue Negre. So this back in those days, remember now, this was in the early 1920s. 1925 is when she arrived in Paris. So she had a famous dance called the banana dance. I don't have a picture of it. And she danced in this banana skirt. And for the most part, she danced topless in Paris. So even though this gave Black entertainers an opportunity to go to France and Paris to become famous and pursue their craft. As a matter of fact, Josephine became famous as soon as she got there. But what also happened is that there was something called negrophilia, which was an attitude which sort of objectified um, Black people, and it sort of made them seem like sort of exotic creatures. So that was one of the negative impacts. But Josephine Baker was famous. Josephine Baker, she was not just a dancer, she was also a humanitarian. She was also a spy for the French. She was also a civil rights activist, and she adopted many children. So she was also, she believed in helping, giving people a hand up. So here we go. This is, and my slides were looking just a little off. This here is one of the venues that's open still. It's one of the clubs. So clubs became big time in Paris at that time. Um, that club is still open. I can't, you could barely see it right here, but the name of this club is Calaver de la. I can't pronounce that, so I'm not even going to try to pronounce it. But that club timeline, it started in the 1930s. Jazz became a major part of Parisian life. Okay, so out of that came something called gypsy jazz, and this is like a new kind of jazz that was blended with gypsy music and American music. This guy was named Django Reinhold. So this is in France. So African Americans brought jazz to France and Europe. So the French and other Europeans, this guy was Belgian, right next door to France. He was raised in France. He was a Belgian jazz guitarist and composer, and he sort of blended his Romanian gypsy style with the American jazz and came up with this gypsy jazz form. Now, World War II. During World War II, the Nazi occupation of France occurred. So during that time, it became a little bit more difficult to um, perform jazz. It was suppressed by the Nazis. The Nazis believed that it was just sinful. Isn't that a contradiction? So many of the jazz musicians and performers moved to Marseille, that's in the southern part of France on the Mediterranean. This port of Marseille also served as a gateway for African American musicians and culture. And it still is today, but not just African American musicians, African musicians, people from other countries, Lebanon, let's see, other countries in Africa because it's right there at the port. It's fairly close. As a matter of fact, Marseille was what was a major port during the transatlantic slave trade. So there are quite a few black Frenchmen, black Parisians who live in France as a result of the transatlantic slave trade. So black people have been all over Europe for hundreds of years. Okay, so Miss Josephine Baker, like I said, she wasn't just a dancer. She was also a double agent for the French resistance during World War II. She was also, like I said, a civil rights activist. So she actually was a spy. She would hide communiques in her gowns and costumes and pass information from the French resistance to the Americans. And the Nazis, she did this right under their nose. They didn't suspect her of anything. And she was just an entertainer. That's as far as they thought of her. So she actually won. Uh, she was actually honored in 2021 by being interred in the French Pantheon in 2021. So that's where the heroes of France are buried. Next, we talk about the African American soldiers that were stationed in France um, during World War II and after. So World War I started jazz. World War II, it furthered jazz. It brought more jazz sounds and more Black American musicians who also decided to stay after their military service, such as pianist Bud Powell and drummer Kenny Clark. What they did was they formed bands and they performed in clubs all around France. So that was yet an extension of um, more opportunities for African Americans in France. So now we move on to the modern jazz artists. So times have changed. Uh, in France, it's totally different when it comes to jazz. They have had many, many other people contribute to jazz in France, such as this guy is Christian Aduja. Now, he is actually an American jazz trumpeter. He was born in New Orleans. He incorporated sounds that reflect his and mine and many of yours, your African heritage and elements of society, African heritage and society in music from around the globe. There were also many other African um, performers who contributed to jazz because, like I said, Marseille is a place where people entered the country. People emigrated to France from the former colonies. Um, and created a life for themselves for generations, and they also contributed. So this is some of the this is one person of note who is one of the modern jazz musicians today, and he performs in France. Another guy is Ibrahim Malouf, he's a French Lebanese trumpeter, producer, and composer. He made a album, a collaboration with called Queen of Sheba with this Beninese singer named Angelique Kiddo. So he was the first Lebanese instrumentalist to win a Grammy for that collaboration with this artist. So, does anyone have any questions at all? Any comments? I'm just checking to make sure that everybody's still here. Anybody have any questions? Anyone want to know anything else? Hello. Yep, Chloe said she's joining from Brooklyn. Didn't realize you were in Brooklyn. I'm from Brooklyn, Chloe. So, yes, let me make sure. Thank you all for joining. I appreciate it. So, for those of you on the replay audience, thank you. I appreciate you too. If you ask any questions, just and you're on Facebook or you're on YouTube, just ask your question and I will answer it. Now, everyone will get a copy of this presentation as long as you signed up. All right. Now, these are just a couple of the jazz festivals because there are actually jazz festivals that go on every year. Yes, Chloe. Hey, Chloe. Yep. Thank you. Thank you. Jazz festivals continue in France. Jazz Avignon, that's in the southern part of France, in Provence. We'll actually be stopping in Vienne. There are actually jazz clubs there. Nice is also a southern France city. There are also jazz festivals in Nice, as well as Avignon. We will be disembarking in Avignon. France in the southern part, there are jazz, like I did mention it before, but there are jazz clubs there. So France is a place that all of that they love jazz, and it all started with the African American soldiers during World War One bringing it with them. So I'm going to wrap up on this part. For the history of jazz, it's a testament to the genre's ability to cross cultural boundaries and inspire musicians and audiences around the world. It has its early roots in African American soldiers and performers coming there and relocating to France after the wars, World War One and World War Two. And there's a significant impact on France's cultural landscape. So that was just a little bit about the history of jazz in France. Does anybody have any comments or any questions? I am checking. Thank you. Thank you. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the trip. So, The Good Life and Soul is an Epicurean experience, and it will be Juneteenth 2024. So, that should tell you June of 2024. So, start putting it on your calendars. So, by the end of this month, let's see, by next week, the trip booking page should be open. Now, the people on the VIP list will get first dibs to book because this is a river cruise. It's not like your ocean liners like Royal Caribbean and those big like the Odyssey of the Seas or the Harmony of the Seas that take thousands of passengers. These are river cruise ships and you do not lose sight of the land. You sail down the highways of Europe. In this case, it'll be France. You sail the highways of Europe and then you get off in the little towns and you're in the middle of town and then you get back on your boutique hotel that floats. You can unpack once and you just visit many cities, many destinations, have many opportunities to interact. Also, in river cruises, everything is all inclusive. That includes your wines, your beers, your sodas, your meals, your chef's restaurant, all of your tours are included. Now, on AMA Waterways, you have a choice of tours. You don't have to go on them all, but you have at least 2 tours per day. So you have a morning tour and an afternoon tour, and you have an opportunity to choose. So great, Joanne. Happy to see you. Hope to see you on the cruise. So yeah, the ocean liners take you to destinations, but river cruises take you through them. So if you're interested in history, if you're interested in experiences, river cruising is for you. So remember, get on the VIP list. The link is in the post. Uh, Let me just post it again for the people who are on the StreamYard webinar. So let me just pull up the page so you can see. Okay. All right. I'm going to put a link to it here so you all can see it again. There. Here we go. Now I'm going to attempt to share my screen again to this tab. Let us see. Let's move over here. Attempting to share it. Not that one. Ah, I'll tell you. This is my website. Okay. So on my website, that's sillatravel.com, refresh the screen, and there's going to be a pop-up. Come on and pop up. Here we go. And of course, it's slow because of connectivity here. Back by popular demand. Sorry about the delay. It is just slow because of the internet. Hello, Joanne. Thank you, Joanne, for signing up. I hope to see you. So this is where you sign up to become a VIP. You get first dibs to secure your space because space is going to go fast on this. So let's see. Now let me share the actual page. There we go. Now, this is the sign up page. Juneteenth, join the VIP list. Celebrating Juneteenth 2024 in France. Who's the trip for? This it just gives you a little bit of information who it's for. If it's for you, keep scrolling. You'll have some information about the trip, what's included in your river cruise and land package. Oh, did I mention? Yes, this trip is 10 entire days. You get 3 nights in Paris in addition to the 7-night river cruise, and it is complimentary. So, become a VIP, talks about the exclusive excursion, Black History Tour of Paris. There's also going to be one of Marseille. And here are just a couple of links. If you click, this is just in Lyon, the food capital of Paris, Pont du Gard. That's in Provence, France. It's amazing. It's an amazing excursion to go see. It's an ancient aqueduct built by the Romans and 2,000 years ago, and it still stands. If you want to see some of my pics, find my picture and click the link, and then you'll see. This is the link to the Ama Christina. This talks about the passenger boat, the 156 passenger vessel, with spacious rooms, twin balconies. I love the twin balconies. So the twin balconies are a double balcony where you have one where you can sit out and one with the French balcony where you can open the doors. And I like the French balconies because, I like to just open the window. So, yep, Joanne, you said you always want to travel by river cruise. Me too. Yes, ma'am. So Eleanor is asking, are there any evening tours to jazz clubs? There are some evening tours because Eleanor is going on the first voyage. So yes, there are some. I believe it's in Avignon. I'll get back with you on that. But yes, indeed, jazz is a major part of this trip because it is a part of the history. So here we go. Yes, Wesley, it is amazing. France, this part of France is amazing in itself, but just the idea that this company has listened to us and incorporated this type of Black heritage and Black history tour to their um, portfolio is why I stick with them. So this is Priscilla with Scylla Travel. I'm gonna go back. Does anybody have any questions at all? So Lillian saying she's looking forward to next year's trip. Yeah, a lot of people couldn't get on it because it was the first one and it sold out so fast. I couldn't even get a spot, so I had to just leave space for like clients of mine. But next year I'm planning to be there. Definitely planning to be there. So, anybody have any questions at all about this amazing, super amazing trip? Just be looking out. I'll be talking tomorrow more about the trip itself. So be on the lookout so you can sign up for the webinar as well. But the people who signed up will be entered into a drawing. I will send out a message and post on social media who the winners are, just like I did last week. So be sure to follow me on Facebook, Scylla Travel, Facebook, Scylla Travel, and follow me on Instagram. Same thing, the little @ and Scylla Travel. So I'll be posting the winners there, as well as in the replay. When I send out my email, you'll find out who won as well. So let's see. Are there any more questions? Does anyone have any more questions at all about what I talked about? Um, let's see. Does anyone have anything that any burning questions that they might have about this trip? Any at all? Okay. Well, remember, join the VIP list. And this is Priscilla with Scylla Travel, hoping that you have a great rest of your week. Oh, Joanne, asking about the single supplement. Yes, there is a single supplement. I will get back with you. That will be on the trip page when I put it there. There is a single supplement. So it is not the same as double like many of the other companies charge, but there will be one. But you and everyone else will know, the VIPs will know first. So remember, get on that VIP list. So this is Priscilla with Scylla Travel, hoping that you have a great rest of your day, rest of your morning, afternoon, evening, wherever or whenever. Wait, I've got one more question here. Nope, I guess I got that one already. This is Priscilla with Scylla Travel, hoping that you have a great rest of your morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever and wherever you are in the world watching watching the replay or watching this broadcast. And remember, as always, live the dream. Bye-bye.